taking your questions and giving you the answers you need. Some of you have asked your questions when you registered, which we'll be addressing first, but please feel free to post any additional questions in the question dialogue on the GoToMeeting, and we'll take as many of them as we can toward the end. Our session today will be an hour long, so let's go ahead and get started. Take it away, Rob.
All right, thank you very much, Carnegie. So today is a session that I've been looking forward to doing for some time. It's a little bit more freewheeling than the kind of set piece webinars, end user webinars that we've been doing. Gives you an opportunity to ask your questions, and we've enjoyed receiving your suggestions for topics that we should cover. I want to dive right into them. I'm actually going to show you the list of questions that we're going to try to cover today, and it's actually a very long list. I don't think we're going to get all the way through them, but that said, I still want to take some of questions that we get from our attendees if you put them in here. So in order to facilitate that, I'm going to show you what we've got so far. Maybe that will give you some ideas to include for this session. Maybe we will actually, if we get enough of them, we will split them out together with whatever we don't get to today and cover that in our next session. So here on the screen, I'm gonna go through quickly. These are the submitted questions, and this isn't all of the questions, by the way, that were submitted. We sort of bundled them together and organized them in the way that we thought would work best for our presentation today. So if you don't see word for word what you put in, don't feel like we aren't necessarily going to cover you. You probably fall into some of the questions here. So quickly, we're gonna look at how to get help on just the basics of MasterMine, managing email and website related fields, how to manage data quality, how to see reports on next call, last call kinds of things, reporting on opportunities, and how to prevent leads falling through the cracks. Some of these are fairly broad, by the way, as you can tell, and some of them are very specific kinds of questions. The rest of them are kind of, we made a long list of ones that I'm just calling quick tips, and these are ideas, or again, they're things that people knew about or didn't know about, wanted to know a little bit more about, and I just organized them into a list of very short topics, which we're going to just work through as quickly as we can. And I don't think I'll go through that long list. It's kind of it's a fairly long list. This is the first half, and this is the second half, and we're going to sort of hit all of these in different ways. We're going to do these as quickly as we can, and as I say, if we don't get to them all in this session, we'll extend out together with whatever questions you put into the question dialogue and GoToWebinar, and handle them in a later session. The invitation for this meeting also included a suggestion that what we're going to do is have you vote on the best topic that we covered here. It was just our idea to try to have some sort of a contest as part of this. If there are questions that you find particularly useful, or ones that are almost useful, but if they were better asked or if we were better answered and you want to submit them as different questions, please go ahead and do that. Our main focus, of course, is to have you get the information that you need, and our secondary one is to have this be a little more fun and give somebody an opportunity to win something at the end. In this case, what you're going to win is an hour's free consultation with us online doing report writing or whatever, any of the services that we offer. So that quickly is the agenda. I'm going to go back up here and to the submitted questions, and what I'll do is we'll have Carnegie read through our questions and then the quick tips, and Chris and I together will answer them as we go along here. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Carnegie, and Carnegie, go ahead and let's get started with the first one.
All right, we want to see how to get help on the basics of using MasterMine.
Okay, right. So that's not actually Goldmine itself, but how to get help. All right. Something that people need to be aware of as end users is we try to put together content for you through our website that helps you to learn more about MasterMine all the time. I will go to the website quickly just to kind of point this out. And let's go to our home page here. So on the MasterMine homepage, maybe one of the most important things to be aware of that's recent is how to get more information about MasterMine version 7. So if you go to our homepage and you go down under products, you go to MasterMine for Goldmine, there is a really short little 1-minute video there that is not all that informative about how MasterMine works. It's really there to just sort of introduce people who don't have MasterMine. But over to the right-hand side, under New in version 7, learn about the features. This is actually where you can go back and review. There's a little 9-minute video here that goes through what's new in version 7. That's something just, be aware of that. Share it with other users within your organization. If you're a Goldmine dealer and you're on this call also, that's a resource for you as well that you can use to make people aware of what's new. It assumes a little bit of knowledge about MasterMine. So it's directed to people who already use MasterMine, maybe version 6 or earlier, or have a broad idea about how MasterMine works. But this little 9-minute introduction to version 7 helps. So again, that's from the main, from mastermine.net under products, MasterMine for Goldmine, and then there's a link from that page to get here. Other resources that are available under user support, and this I'm not going to go into this too much, but under user support you can learn about our training offerings, live support. There is actually a online answer. We call it Online Answers. It's a knowledge base where you can post questions. You can also get technical support there. And I think that's all I'm going to say about that as far as learning. Oh, YouTube channel. We actually have posted quite a few past little snippets of past webinars, as well as kind of, again, sort of set piece introductions to different aspects of MasterMine. If you search on the name MasterMine on YouTube, you put an E in there at the end, as you should. It'll try to correct you to Mastermind with a D, but override that, and you'll get to our YouTube channel with various topics there. Please comment. Whenever you watch one of our videos, put a comment in so we know whether or not we found it useful or not. Finally, on our website, also over here on the right-hand side, this is back on the home page, MasterMine user webinar recordings. So we've actually got a page that leads you to all the recordings from these end user webinars, as well as right beneath it here it says Goldmine user webinar recordings. Those are ones that we've done for Goldmine users who are not necessarily MasterMine users. So little introductions to how to use Goldmine better that also includes an ad for MasterMine, basically. Okay, so that's my really long answer to how to learn more about MasterMine, at least in terms of recordings and such. Level 1 training, we also have, if you probably already are aware, for those of you who, especially if you sort of posted questions based on not really knowing at all how MasterMine works, you really should get a Level 1 training in MasterMine. It's a 1-hour session. You can schedule it at your convenience. You can have as many attendees from your organization as you want to. Our Level 1 actually came, there was a free one when you bought the software, and we offer it for, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I think we offer it for $180, but it's a great 1-hour session that essentially can get you from we don't know what we're doing to having your fingertips on it and being able to kind of do some basic MasterMine reporting, as well as understanding the things that are around just simply the report interface. In other words, there's a lot in MasterMine about sharing reports and really how to make it work together with your Goldmine, not just technically how to create a report. What else do I want to say about that? The other thing is support packs. You can get MasterMine support packs. MasterMine sort of paid support. We offer the opportunity to go online with you and actually do reporting with you, do data management work using the tools. Chris and I are both the sort of main MasterMine experts, and we're very happy. I'm sure for those of you who've worked with us in the past, you will have your own you already know about how to do this, how to get help from us online. But for those who don't, just go to user support, go under report writing, and get the details about how to get us online working with you, doing reports. And then finally, there is a user manual in MasterMine. And in the latest versions of MasterMine, we've actually made the user manual available in a number of different places. It's available from the help menu when you first launch MasterMine. Also, when you're in the create dialog, it's under help. Even when you're inside of an Excel workbook, a MasterMine workbook, there's all on the MasterMine toolbar ribbon at the top. User manual is one of the options there, so you can launch it from any of those places. So sorry for that really long response to the first question. Carnegie, let's get on to some more interesting stuff.
All right, let's take a look at managing email and website fields.
Okay, so to work with email and website fields, typically what you're going to do is what you have to do is start by creating a report that includes obviously email address or website. And what I want to point out in relation to that is people sometimes, they know that you can easily get the email address from here. They probably don't know that you can also get the email merge codes that go with it, as well as, if I go over here a little bit to the right in the create dialog, there's the email rec ID. Now, it's tucked over here on the right-hand side because you typically only need the email record ID if you're going to be using Updater with email addresses. And I won't go through the whole process of working with that, except I think that usually once I point out those three elements, people realize, oh, okay, once I've got those in my report, it's an easy enough thing to make reports that isolate on certain email addresses that allow me to update that information on the Excel side, and if I've got Updater, to actually fill in missing email addresses as well as correct the existing email addresses. This is, I think I was going to mention this a little bit later, but I'll mention it now. There are two times that Updater actually creates new subrecords in Goldmine. That is when you are filling in a missing email address, it actually creates a subrecord in Goldmine. For those of you who know that that's actually a concept type record in Goldmine. And if it's missing, updating it would be a problem, except that Updater will actually create the place. It'll create the record within which email address can be held. And when it does that, that allows you to do the other updating, including putting in email merge codes and such. It will only allow you to do that if, when you created your initial report, you included the mail merge field as well as the record ID.
I'm going to throw in a question really quick, Rob.
Go ahead. Yep.
Does Updater also allow for updating the email notes, like where IntelliClick puts unsubscribe?
Good question. We're actually working on that. It should make that possible, and it's going to within a few days. I've got it. We have a user who really needs it to do that, and it's not doing that currently. But yes, in a few days we'll have a new build, and I can't tell you what the date's going to be. It'll probably be, if you want to check back in about a week. Yes, it will be possible to update the notes there. Updater generally can update notes in Goldmine if they are the type of notes like in pending or history where the information is all held in one subrecord. The newer Goldmine notes, such as you have under the Notes tab, where each note is actually divided out in its own record, we don't yet have a way to modify those notes. So the ones where in other words, where in Goldmine the note tends to show up, I'll give you a visual here, where the note shows up as a single unit like this, we can update those, and that includes, if I go to somebody who's got an email address here, I actually probably have to create one, that would include this type of note where it's also very kind of a unified sort of a note. Okay, so I hope that answers that question. And I think I've given you basically what I wanted to give you on email managing email and website fields. Carnegie, what's the next thing?
Next question is how to use MasterMine and Updater to manage data quality.
Okay.
Good one.
So that is a very good question. It's also big enough to be its own webinar topic. But there's a few things I just want to mention about that. And I'm going to start actually by saying it's somewhat more, this is a technique issue rather than a technological issue. So how to use MasterMine for managing data quality. The key tips that I want to include on that, first off, are do exception reports. In other words, build reports, MasterMine reports that, and I think I've actually got some here. Let me open one up here. Do reports that are built around what you expect to see in Goldmine. In other words, if you've got a field that's got 6 possible values in it, and you only and your reports show your reports indicate that you've got more than those 6 possible values. In other words, people have typed in incorrect information, or there's been imported data that had things be wrong, and you want that field over time to be kept in good pristine order. Then the thing to do is build reports that exclude the valid values and only show the ones that are invalid. So in other words, if you've got a report that shows everything, you're probably not going to see the exceptions. But if you go in and you know that the valid scores in your database really should only be A, B, C, or D, in other words, those are the things that you would normally have in your lookup for the score field, then build a report and turn off those values, and what you'd be left with is the values that are invalid. And then save the report that looks that way, even call the tab maybe exceptions. And the idea from a from a data management standpoint is have that report that you just simply open up every once in a while and refresh, and when it refreshes, anything that's not a valid value for that field will show up in that list and give you the opportunity then to drill through and fix it. That's probably the best way to handle exceptions for fields where you know what the values should be. And I typically recommend also, don't just, if you create a report and you're the single MasterMine user in the organization, you create such a report, are you going to remember to open it up and look at it once in a while? Hopefully you will, but it's a good idea also to deploy exception reports to end users. So your actual, the people who are entering data into the reports, if they are, let's say, the salespeople, and part of their job is to do accurate forecasting, and within the forecast records, maybe you don't count on them always to enter the data exactly right. Well, if you deploy an exception report to your end users, to the actual sales reps, and just say, your job, sales reps, is every Thursday or Friday morning before we do our weekly forecast meeting, one of your jobs is open the exception report just to see if you've done something wrong during the week, to see if you've entered forecast that has invalid values in it, didn't put in the right activity codes, didn't put in one of the acceptable probabilities. Then that report would just quickly show that, and they could quickly drill through, fix the information on Goldmine so that when they actually have the meeting with the sales manager to say what their forecast is, there's no question that what's in there is, at least to the best of their knowledge, accurate and ready to go. Okay, then we can talk about cleaning up after importing data. The second most common way that data quality deteriorates over time is data imports. Usually that's handled by one central person, so at least it's not everybody in the organization contributing to the deterioration there. But imports are notoriously difficult to do, whether you're using the Goldmine, the old Goldmine import that you find in the Goldmine menus, or the new one that's built in with the Excel, the Goldmine Excel add-in. Both of those are in my opinion, somewhat problematic, and they leave lots of room for human error when you're doing the importing. So how do you use Updater for that? Well, I would say a couple of things. One is after you do an import, just run a quick MasterMine report that includes all the fields that you imported. It's typically going to be a regular create dialog. So in other words, you're going to be running the MasterMine create. And I'm saying that it's going to be, excuse me, a typical create against the main contact information, because importing, for the most part, only imports contact level information. It doesn't import pending or history activity, for example. So essentially, to do that, to do a check, a visual check of whether your import ran right, just run the regular create dialog, check on the fields, specifically the fields that you imported, include them all. It's easy enough to find them all and check them on, and bring that information into a report and just visually check it. Just go kind of splash it out on the page and see if all the values that are in there look right. There's a second value to this, which is when you do this MasterMine report, you're not only going to see the records that you imported themselves, which you can isolate on those, of course, if you do it by source. Let's say if you're using the source field as part of your import, to indicate just the ones that you did the import for. But secondly, look at them in the context of your overall data. So in other words, turn off whatever filtering you use inside the report so that it only shows you the ones that you imported, so that you see the new ones and the old ones together in your sheet. And that will help you also to visually to kind of remind you, oh, okay, well, when we imported the contact type field, I put in client when what I really should have put in was customer. When you're only looking at the ones that you imported, of course, you're only going to see the values that were the ones that you were thinking of at the time you did the import. And if they all say client, somehow in your mind you might be thinking, oh, that's the correct value. But if you look at it in the context of your overall data, you'll see client and customer, and you realize, oh, I didn't do those right. Then you just turn around, use Updater, change all those ones that say client to say update, and that will fix the problem. One of the things that I've heard recently from people, I was talking with somebody about how they do their imports, and they said, oh yeah, importing is relatively easy. It's just that we have to do it 3 or 4 times before we get it right. So we import it into a side database, get all the data right there, and then import it into our main production database. And that's okay. That's a process, but it might be a little easier if you're using Updater to just have confidence in the fact that once the data is inside Goldmine, you can use Updater to tweak it to get it right, rather than go through those kind of multiple processings to import a set of data. I think that's all I want to say on the data quality part of it. Sorry, there is one other kind of major topic under data quality, and this came up a number of times from people in the questions, and that has to do with deduplication. Deduplication is a big issue with Goldmine. For those of you who are not aware, Goldmine does have built-in tools for deduping that allow you to sort of step through your records on almost on a one-by-one basis, but you don't have to kind of plod through the data all that fast, or excuse me, all that slowly. It will find ones that it thinks are duplicates. If it's available only, I think, to master users in Goldmine. If you don't see it when you go to your tools menu in Goldmine, let us know. It's under Tools, Data Management. So there's the built-in Goldmine data duplication things, but there are also a couple of tricks you can use with MasterMine and Updater to eliminate duplicates. And probably the most important one, I'm going to be able to illustrate here just with this report that we already have up. And Chris, I'm going to give you a chance to talk about this a little bit here too, but I wanted to start by just giving my initial take on this. And that is basically deduping by sorting. Fields get to have in particular, the way you find duplications in Goldmine is by finding similar information, of course. And usually, I'll just use the sort of contact and company duplication method to talk about this. What I do is I take a create dialog. Let's say I've got a population of information that's in Goldmine, and I see I'm missing a field here. I'm just going to throw in a a value for it. What I typically will do is look at a population of data, and if it's a large enough population, you can do a subset of what all's in Goldmine. You don't have to do the entire database. But of course, every record that you import or that's added as a potential duplication is going to have to be compared against every other record that's in the database. So if you've got a reasonably sized database, when I say reasonably, I mean under 100,000 records, this should still work for you fairly conveniently in an Office 2007 or higher. Essentially what I'm doing is sorting alphabetically. To start with alphabetically. Now this is a relatively small database, so there's only 300 records in here. So we may not see very many dupes. We may not see very many, especially if we were just visually scanning down the line here. The trick here is instead of sorting alphabetically, sort it by the number of occurrences of a name. And in fact, we can start. I'm going to reduce this down to just the company, and I'll sort this descending by the number of occurrences. So just using the built-in Excel here, I'm going to use more sort options. I'm going to sort instead of manually or instead of alphabetically by company name. I'm going to do it descending by the number of occurrences. In other words, in this case, it's the account number field that's in my data area. So what we see is count of account now as the value that's in our data area. And when I hit OK, it's going to do it descending by the number of occurrences of the company name. So there are 44 that have Global Corp and 2 that have Madison Manufacturing, 2 in McDonald Manufacturing. Now that may be legitimate that we've got more than one, so we can find out whether they're duplicates by drilling down or by rolling down the contact name. So if I double-click on McDonald Manufacturing and choose to show the contact name, it'll actually pull that field in here and just for McDonald Manufacturing, give me the details. Now, why did I do that instead of just dragging the contact field in? The reason I did that was I wanted all the rest of them to remain rolled up so that visually it wouldn't just push everything down the screen. So if I double-click here on Global Corp, you'll see there are 44 of those, so I see the 44 individual names. By the way, I don't see any duplications among them. If I did, I would see a 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever in the data area. So this happens, my demo data here happens to be fairly clean already. So I've got individual names for everybody. If you did this on your own database and you're not using a nice clean demo database like I've got, you're obviously going to find probably a fair number of those duplicates. And from there, you'll be able to drill through and eliminate the dupes just because you see them next to each other, or use use tricks like building Goldmine groups with selected ones in the drill down. I'll show you that just quickly. So if I drill down and show you all, these are the 44 that are all in the Global Corp. Let's suppose I actually did have some duplicates among the names here. It would be relatively easy to go through and just select the ones that I wanted to highlight. Let's say all of these were duplicate names, okay? And I would be visually seeing, whether they actually are duplicates by the rest of the information that's next to each other. And once I've highlighted and selected the ones that I want in my group, then I can go over and build a Goldmine group against those names. And I think all of you are probably familiar with the Goldmine delete wizard inside of Goldmine. I would just run my delete wizard, but use this Goldmine group that I'm creating here as the target, and that should quickly eliminate those ones that I visually within my list determined were duplicates. So that's all I wanted to say on that. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Just a couple comments. First off is whenever you use the Goldmine delete, always make sure you're using a backed up database before you start doing that process. Mm-hmm. Make sure that you always back up when you're going to, anytime you use the global replace or global delete in Goldmine, there is no safety net. So that's really the only thing I wanted to say. And I did want, would you go back to the sheet and just show them what you did to get the count in there again? Because I think you went a little fast and a lot of people didn't see what you did there.
Are you talking about just dragging the field in?
Just dragging in the C1 account no in. In order to have a count, you have to have something to pivot on. And so
right.
When you have the blank there, you have to pivot on something. And the typical field to use to pivot on is the account node, because it's a unique number, and so when you
and there's a value in every record.
Right. Every single record has to have an account now. So that's your best way to get a count. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And I can see we're already burning through our time pretty quickly here, so we'll try to get through these. And I'm sorry, I'm speaking very quickly. At the same time, I wanted to cover a lot of territory. So if there are other questions or ideas that come up here, please go ahead and submit those in the question dialogue or in the survey afterwards. Carnegie, what's our next question?
How to see, okay, I was making sure I wasn't muted, sorry.
Yep.
How to see next or last calls, appointments, etc.
Okay. Right. We got a couple of questions about this, and this is a fairly common thing in reporting. People want to know not just, you want to have a report of your contacts, but you also want to know what's the date of the next call, what's the subject of the next call, not everything that's on their pending tab, but just the next one, just what's scheduled next, or what's the most recent one. So just the most recent history, what was their, what's the date of it, who made the call, what was on the reference line, what's in the notes. All of that can be done using templates and using our templates that are built in here. And what I usually recommend is just run the create dialog, hit use template, and try some search words in here that usually will get you. The search words will usually get you to a template that's useful for whatever you want to do. So if you want the next activity, you might put in the word next and hit search. And that gives you, actually, there is a report here, next pending activity, only all contacts. So that's a template that gives you a report of for all the contacts in the database, or a subgroup of them if you choose to filter it, which that's an important thing to bear in mind. If what you want to do is say, for example, only the records that we got at the trade show last spring, I want to follow up and make sure that there's a pending activity for all of them. You can have, if you have a group in Goldmine of those ones, that indicates that, if your Goldmine group indicates they are the trade show attendees, then you can apply that group and run this template, and that essentially will give you your full list of just the next pending activity for each one of them. And this can be modified somewhat. So you can do just the next pending call, or the next pending sale, or the next pending appointment, or the next pending of any of 2 or 3 different types. But if you want to get into that specificity, you may have to have a little help from us to tweak the query, because those are actually somewhat that's a very specific way of addressing that information. We also have had users who want to do things with, let's look at last completed activity. That's probably an even more common thing. Let's do the word last. So if I put in the word last, there's actually a variety of templates to choose from there. I'm going to try not to drag my field too much because that's going to update your screen. A variety of different flavors of last completed activity. In a lot of cases, you may consider any phone call or appointment to be a potential contact with the customer, or sale for that matter. But you may not consider a last completed other or a last completed next action. Those might be things that you do internally within the organization, and not consider those to be actual contacts with the customers. The thinking behind these templates is that it gives you the ability to take any subset of your data. Again, it might be the leads from a certain trade show, or that might be from a certain campaign or something, and to look at them and actually see comprehensively, have we made contact with them recently? Not just is there any history at all in Goldmine for them, but has there actually been a verbal communication between a sales rep on our side and a person on their side? And you may want to exclude, let's say, phone calls that were only left a message from your list of last last activity. By looking at this, what it allows you to do is to tell, you may have a good customer out there that you think you've got a great relationship going with, but nobody in your organization has actually had a phone call with them in which they spoke with them and created a history record, with a result code indicating that they spoke with them. Maybe that hasn't happened in the last 90 days or 120 days or something. You might be losing touch with a customer, and this is your way of making sure that you've actually got them. So I always emphasize making use of these last completed activities as a way to identify the leads or the customers that are being neglected. I think that's generally answers that question. I don't want to go too much more into that. We do sometimes get a request for a report, and we may do a template in the future that shows both the next and the last call in the same report. And the reason we have not done a template that way so far is that that's actually kind of a complicated thing if you think about it, because each activity involves, as I said, the user ID, the time and date that it happened, the reference line, the notes. Potentially there are about 20 different pieces of information about both the last call and the next call. And by the time you get all those out in a spreadsheet and you've got 40 columns, that gets to be visually very confusing. So usually we wind up doing something kind of custom for the user, depending specifically on what parts of that information they want to have. I think that's all I'm going to do on that subject. Carnegie, what's the next one? Let's try and get through these next two and get onto the quick tips fairly quickly.
Right. We got reporting on opportunities.
Okay, opportunities. A lot of people don't know because when you, I think this really relates to your setup of MasterMine. On the left-hand side here, if you don't actually see the opportunities button, you may not know that, actually let me go back into these. I'm going to reset this, take off my search. You may not know that built into MasterMine are a whole series of reports that work with opportunities almost any way that you normally work with them. I don't have, in the future we may do a webinar, and for the user who asked about this, give us more specificity, and maybe I'll figure out something better to say about this. But we have these templates that are built around the different parts of opportunities as they are built in. And so when you click on the opportunities button on the left-hand side, you see these templates. You can typically do your reports from those. The individual ones, details, forecast, influencers, and so on, those are built around the different tabs within the opportunity record inside of Goldmine. The vast majority of the reporting that I see that's done against opportunities kind of ignores those unless you're specifically going after the information on that tab for its own standalone report. But 90% of the time, your reporting really is going to be using the main one, the opportunities report at the top, or the pending in history, or the sales and activity. It'd be among those top three usually. The other thing I'll say about that is if you don't see opportunities showing up on the left-hand side of your screen, it's not because the MasterMine you have doesn't have that built in. It's just that you need to set in your preferences under toolkits, you need to check on the opportunities. Chances are, if you don't see it there, it's because when you installed MasterMine, maybe the organization wasn't using opportunities yet, so they just didn't turn that on. But it is always possible under preferences to turn it on so that the opportunities templates do show up. So that's under preferences. And what's the last one before we get to the quick tips?
How to prevent leads from falling through the cracks.
Okay, that's a great big topic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to say rather than show what I was going to talk about on that. And if you'd like to know more about this one, feel free to submit more questions on the topic of how to of this. But I'll keep this relatively short. So preventing leads from falling through the cracks. Well, my first kind of main tip on that is to report regularly. In other words, use reports all the time using groups, and to follow them over time. So using the example that I mentioned before about wanting to make sure that you followed up on all the leads from a trade show that you went to. Set up a group in Goldmine that points to that to the results of the people who were in your database on the basis of having been to that trade show. So set up a group as opposed to just using the source field. And the reason I say that is the source field tends to change over time. A group doesn't need to change over time, and it can overlap with other groups. And so why does the source field change in Goldmine? Well, it can change because you got somebody as a lead from a certain source, and then you met the same person again at a trade show 6 months later, and in order to indicate that you talked to them at the trade show, maybe you go in and you change the source field. Well, now you've lost the original source of that lead. Where if you're using Goldmine groups and have those groups indicate, in this case, the people you met at a trade show, regardless of whether they're new leads from that show, using those groups over time will allow you to do a lot of different things, both in Goldmine and in MasterMine. And the Goldmine side, of course, it allows you to send emails to them based on that group, or to follow up on them in one way or another. On the MasterMine side, what it does is it allows you to create MasterMine reports that use filters. So again, if you're going to do a report on, let's say, the completed activities, I'll do this a different way here. So let's say the completed calls that were made to everybody who was in whatever group you select. And by the way, in the new version of MasterMine, you can select not only groups under your own name, but also groups from another user, which can be very useful, especially if you want to, if you've got groups that were created by, say, a master user, and everybody shares those groups. This allows you to do that. And then once you choose those, then you can pick out your groups, or pick out the groups in order to be the basis for some MasterMine reports. On the other side, of course, it's easy to use MasterMine to create those groups in the first place. So think of your MasterMine tool, or your MasterMine tool set, as being both a way of feeding reports by setting up the groups, as well as a way of actually doing the reports that use those groups. Let's see, I had one other thing I wanted to say about this. The other thing, I have a couple of other notes. So one is leads fall through the cracks for various reasons, of course. And most often what I see is in our own database, if there's an error, it's probably not a unique error. In other words, if I've got leads that we brought in from a trade show and we miscoded them, and the result of the miscoding is that they're not showing up in our reports, or they're not getting the literature sent out to them because they were coded as a prospect instead of suspect, or whatever, you will have information that just sort of disappears into your Goldmine data because of miscoding. And I think you probably all got that experience, so you don't need to give too many examples. But if you find something that is miscoded, don't just assume it's the only thing that was miscoded that way. Do reports, or do queries, or do searches based on that incorrect code, and find out, is there other data that is also like that. So if you had a whole batch of leads that got put in with the wrong code in there, don't just fix the one, find the other ones that have the same code. You could use MasterMine process as an updater to get that fixed. That's probably the easiest way. But whatever it is, that's what I call learning from your mistakes. I think that's all I'll say on that one. And then the other thing is match your reports to whatever standards you set up for your database. So create reports that are built against the expectations for how data is going to be handled in how records are handled in your database. So if every lead should have a pending call, then make a MasterMine report that shows you every live lead and the pending call that goes with it, and with the result that if there's a blank space where the pending call should be, boom, you've found a missing lead, and you can go in and schedule a call for it, that sort of thing. Okay, I think that's all I'm going to say right now on leads falling through the cracks. There's probably a million things I could cover with regard to that, but I want to get on to at least some of our quick tips. We've got about 10 minutes left in the meeting here, and I did want to give people a chance to put in other questions. Just to sort of check in, Carnegie, have we had other questions come in while we've been talking here?
We have.
Are there a lot of them or just a few?
Just a few.
Okay.
Just a few. How do you copy the original report to another tab when modified?
Okay. That's a quick and easy one. So
yes.
Here's the original report. Here's a report. Copying is just it's a tool on the MasterMine toolbar here, and it's Clone Worksheet. Essentially hit one button and it copies that tab. I think that was the question. If the question is how do you copy that out into into another workbook so that it can be archived or so that it can be sent off to somebody who doesn't have MasterMine, for that you have the snapshot dialog, which actually will create a copy of the same sheet within the workbook and timestamp it, or actually put it into a new workbook. What's the next one?
That was easy. It was regarding lead analysis. Is there a way to get all contacts with pending and history records? It sounds like they want a combination of contacts and pending and history, whether or not they have history items or not. Am I making sense?
Not sure. Hopefully this answers the question, and if the questioner wants to elaborate on it, go ahead and do that in the question dialog. If what you're asking is how do you do a report that shows both all the contact records as well as history and pending, for that you just run the create dialog and you check on both pending and history. And you can include, whichever types of activity you want. And if you want to check on whatever fields you want to include, you can check all those on. And essentially that will give you all contacts, all pending, all history, all fields in all of those tables. You're going to wind up with just an enormous report if you do that. So I don't recommend it. I have had people ask for it. Usually with a couple of follow-up questions we find out, well, really what they wanted was something much more specific than that. Or what they wanted to do was export, just a massive amount of data from Goldmine into some other place for some other purpose. And usually that purpose can be accomplished within Goldmine or within Excel, and then they find out that they were just kind of traveling down the wrong road.
Yeah, he had said he's only been able to get contacts or contacts with pending and history records, so it sounds like he wants a combination. Might be something we'd
Oh, I see what he's saying. He wants to be contacts that have whether or not they have history include all the contacts. I think that's the question there.
Yeah.
And for that purpose, use a template. You will find things under, let's see, all. I think if I do a search on, or just on the word all. Let's see. I'm not seeing it here. Actually, I was expecting. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the pending and history only right now. Let me turn off pending and history to just look at history. So, okay. So if you can do all contacts with all the history or all contacts with all the pending. If you need to do a report that's all contacts with and then including also the pending and history, you're going to run into the same issue that I was mentioning before about trying to do too much all in one go there. But you do have these all accounts records that allow you to do different types of those. And if there's some variation on that that's not available to you right away here, we can either build it for you or just show you how to do it within the query. Okay, do we have more?
We have a couple more that popped up.
Okay.
When I'm looking at an existing pivot table and I know that new contacts have been added to Goldmine, can I use the refresh all button at the top to bring the new contacts into my report?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Was there more to that question than I understood?
That was good. No, okay. I think that was it.
Yeah, refresh. And actually that's actually one of the things I had on the quick tips was people oftentimes think, I need a report, I better run a new one. Don't fall into that trap. Any MasterMine report that you create is reusable. you just hit the save button when you're done with it, and then call it back again from the launch dialog. That's why we added this launch dialog at the beginning, to make it easy to find them. And open it up, hit the refresh button, and you're ready to go. And you can branch off using Save As, using Excel's regular Save As. You can branch off. So any report that you've created in the past, you can reuse and reorganize the fields. Now with version 7, you can even add fields that you neglected to include the first time you came in. So in a lot of cases, you never have to go back to the create dialog unless you're just building something new from scratch. You really feel like you need to build something new from scratch because you needed a different query.
Now I have a couple people that wanting to see the actual grouping, Goldmine groups.
Building Goldmine groups?
The button, yeah, but if you can walk through the whole process so they can see that.
Okay. Without going too far into it, let's take, so the idea here is you can build a Goldmine group against whatever records you have. Presumably you want to do some sort of filtering up front so that you're not having to pick from everything on the sheet. But let's say we use our criteria up here to isolate the segment we want to work with. I'll take Lori's 79 records here. Now, you could just build a group against all 79. That's the easy thing. Once you're on the drill down sheet that shows them individual records, go to the MasterMine drill down menu or ribbon, and on this ribbon is the item here for Goldmine group. Now, if I just click on it while I've got my default set here, it's going to want to build a group against all 79 records. So I'll just click it and show you the dialog here. So that would be against all 79 records. You would name the group, hit the OK button, and that's it, basically, to build a Goldmine group. You can be more selective in here. You can highlight whatever ones you want. And what I'm doing, by the way, I just drag selected a set of them, but I also held down my Control button to add to the selected group. And as you can see, the other ones are still highlighted up here, plus this one. By the way, it doesn't matter what column I'm in when I do my selections. All of these are going to be joining the group. It's just that if I highlight something else up here, these are already highlighted, so I'm not adding anything to the group. But basically, by highlighting which ones I want, using the Control key to get all of them after the first set or after the first one, that basically gives me the selection that I want, and then just hit the Goldmine group button, and now you'd see there are 35 rows with selected items in them. So I name the group, hit the OK button, and that's basically it to create the Goldmine group. I hope there's not more to that question that I'm missing.
I think that's it, and I think this one's a good question. What if I'm looking for customers with no history?
Customers that have no history. Yep. So there's a couple of ways to go about that. To me, the most straightforward one is there's actually a template in here for, I believe it's actually called No History. And if not, we might have eliminated it in favor of some other ones. But let's look at history. Use a template. Say no history. So no history activity. Yes, there is a template for that. So that's the sort of fast and easy way. And that will give you, obviously, no history fields because there's no history for those records by definition. But you can get all the other records that have no history activity. What I think is a more interesting one is no history since a certain date. And for that purpose, then you go back to those last completed activity ones, and in there you can have a somewhat tighter control or more nuanced kind of a result. If you want no history at all, then you can just use the last completed activity of any type report. What that gives you in your report is every record in the database and the date and detail for the most recent activity. Well, if there's no activity at all, they'll still show up here, but they will show as a record with no history activity, and you can just isolate on those and do what you want to do. Or you can say, in that report, you can eliminate the ones that do have activity in the last, let's say, 90 days or whatever, and that will leave you with the ones that don't have activity in the last 90 days, including the ones that have no activity at all. that is, I don't know if you need me to do that visually. We're almost out of time here, so I won't get into that too much more. But if people have more questions about that, again, please submit those or either in the question box here or in the survey afterwards, and I'll be happy to cover that in a future webinar. I think we can take one more. Now we're not going to get to the quick tips list that I wanted to go through. I think we'll probably just do our whole next webinar maybe on the quick tips. And I apologize. Some of my answers today, they just required some more talking than I wanted to do. Let's take one more, Carnegie.
One, somebody had pointed out when you were talking about the refresh all that you might have to resort your fields when they show up, because when you do refresh all, they show up at the bottom of your Excel. It was a good point out.
Good point. And by the way, so here's an example of where new values wound up at the bottom of the list, and that's what happens. You run a MasterMine report, and you create a report, and then somebody adds a new value that wasn't in that field already. The default setting for each field in MasterMine is actually manual sort. That's something not a lot of people know. The default setting is, whoops, and I just did what I didn't want to do. The default setting is manual sort. When you first see the records come in, they are alphabetical, and that's just because they're alphabetical because that's how the pivot table by default pulls data in. But but even though they're alphabetical, once you've created that report and saved it, and let's say somebody enters in this case, a new account manager into the database, the new values will just show up at the bottom of the list, not in alphabetical order. That's something to be aware of. But if you know that has happened, or if that's an important thing to you, what you can always do is go in and set the sort for each one of your fields to alphabetical. Set it to A to Z by account manager, or excuse me, by the content of the field, and then things will always show up alphabetically for that field from then on. So even if I close this report, come back, open it again a week from now, refresh it, that field will still be set to alphabetically sort, and so any new values will show up in the alphabetical sort. I hope that was clear. All right, we are at the end of our hour, and we've had a lot of really good participation from the attendees. We really appreciate the questions that you've put in here, the questions you supplied to us in advance. In the survey after this, you're going to have the opportunity to say whether this was useful or not, but also to vote on what topic we covered or what question was asked that you found the most useful, and the person who asked that question, and if there were multiple people who asked the same question, we're going to randomly pick among them, will receive a free 1-hour online session with us. An online session during which we can do report writing for you, do data management work. When we say data management, people sometimes don't know what we mean. We're talking about actually, cleaning up a set of data if that's an issue for you and you've got Updater. We can also, if you don't actually own Updater already, for the purposes of that session, we might just turn it on so that we can do that work for you. We will, in the next session, we'll take your feedback from this one, and we will try to incorporate both your questions and your suggestions and your comments about how this one went into our next monthly session, which will be the third Thursday in July. So put that on your calendar now. I thank you all for taking the time to meet with us today. We're just a minute over our time, so we've brought it in about on time. With that, I will thank Carnegie and Chris very much for your help on the session today, and hopefully you'll be with us. You, the end users, will be with us a month from now when we handle some more user questions. All right, thanks very much, everybody.